Bismillahi walhamdulillahi wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillahi. We begin a series of reflections on the obstacles in the path of Dawah. And basically, what we're talking about is looking at some characteristics which are problematic in the sense of characteristics that if we have them, they create a problem for us in the path of Dawah. Now, when we talk about Dawah, we have to remember that if we define Dawah as calling to the path of Allah wa ta'ala, then we're talking about actually calling for the practice of the deen in all of its various aspects. We're not just asking people to come into Islam, but we're even talking about and calling to building ourselves up as individuals in our relationship with Allah. We're talking about the building of masajid. We're talking about the education of our children. We're talking about many aspects that we should have as a community that are necessary for us to be a healthy and strong community. One of the obstacles that we encounter in the path of da'wah is the concept of apathy. And apathy is when people begin not to involve themselves in constructive activities. They don't even care. They don't even feel the need. And some say that apathy is biggest sign is when people become lazy or they can't commit for a long period of time. Because when we talk about our lives as Muslims, we're talking about a reality. And that reality requires of us to cooperate with each other. Ta'awun ala al-birr wa taqwa. It requires of us to cooperate with each other, even if it's just to establish the salah, or if it's to establish salat al-janazah, or if it's to collect the zakat, or if it's to have a circle of teaching the Quran, or if it's to assist people in getting married, or if it's to build a masjid, or if it's to collect the zakat for a specific purpose that is not related to our situation at hand, but to the needs of others. It requires cooperation. So one of the obstacles that we find ourselves in is that we begin to lose our sense of commitment. We begin to lose interest in the whole concept of working to build our lifestyle as Muslims. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in the Quran says, وَلَهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَنْ عِنْدَهُ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِهِ وَلَا يَسْتَحْسِرُونَ يُسَبِّحُونَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَلَا يَفْتُرُونَ. And so in this ayah of the Quran, we get this idea of commitment to ibadah. And the example that's given is the example of the angels. And here, one of the things that's brought up is that Allah wa ta'ala is the one that is the master over all that exists in the heavens and the earth. And those that are with him, and in this case, the mention is of the angels, they are not proud. In other words, they humble themselves to serve Allah wa ta'ala, and nor do they ever tire of the worship of Allah wa ta'ala. And they praise Allah wa ta'ala night and day, right? And they don't deviate from that, and neither do they become bored with the ibadah or the worship of Allah. The example of the angels here is an example of commitment, and is an example of investment, and is an example of knowing one's place before Allah wa ta'ala. And so the angels are shown to be in a continual state of ibadah. Of course, the human being is not the same as the angels, but the ibadah of the human being comes with balance. The ibadah of the human being comes with balance. The ibadah of the human being can be anything from the salah to eating or going to the bathroom or marrying or working. The whole of the life of the human being can be an act of worship, an act of ibadah, if it's taken in the right way with the right intention. But when we look at apathy, why is it that people cease to care and they become lazy in the process of the practice of the deen? Why does that happen to us? There's some ideas that are brought forward to discuss the issue of why it is that we become lazy in our practice of the deen. Of those ideas that are looked at as causes for why we can become lazy in the practice of the deen is the issue of being extreme, of and exaggerating. And so we have some guidance from the Prophet ﷺ, beware of exaggeration in the deen, for those who were before you were destroyed because of their exaggeration in the deen. And so some people, what they do is that they commit themselves to a lot of different acts of ibadah, rituals mostly, and then they forget the need to rest. Or everything in life for them is haram, 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 so they don't enjoy life. And so with that type of extreme, what happens is that that lifestyle snaps back, and it starts with the children, it starts with the spouses, and then at the end you find that the person that takes that approach to life where everything is just haram, 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 or everything just has to be salah, 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 or everything has to be just one way only, they don't have a sense of balance. The Prophet ﷺ lived a balanced life. What ends up happening is that slowly everything that they were committed to, and they were being extreme about it in their commitment, they fall short of it. And then they become lazy, right? You find some people initially, they pray 5 times a day. They pray all of the sunan along with 5 times a day. They're getting up for tahajjud at night. They're reciting the Quran. They're fasting. They're making dhikr. And they have no balance with that. And they start to fall short on other angles or other aspects of their lives. And then after a while, they burn out. And then all of that ibadah, all of that commitment that they have, it goes to the wayside. They can't maintain it because they're not balancing themselves out. Especially in this fast-paced life that we live, there has to be some balance. Another cause of apathy is the issue of overeating. And we find that there's mention where the Quran says, وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تَصْرِفُوا وَقُولُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تَصْرِفُوا. Eat and drink and don't waste. And here the wastefulness is a sense of exaggeration, right? Eat and drink and don't waste. And so the part of the wastefulness, when we eat to an excess, it makes us tired, it makes us weak, it makes us unhealthy, it makes us inactive, and so we find ourselves slowing down. Perfect example of that is Ramadan. What allows some of us to maintain Ramadan is that commitment to the frame of time, and we're trying to keep out that balance. But as soon as we delve into trying to eat a lot, and then we don't get a lot of sleep, and then we're trying to be in the masjid a lot, everything falls apart. But we find that when we take everything in its proper place, put everything in its proper place, we have to work, we have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to engage in acts of ibadah above the 5 prayers that we normally engage in, then we find that we're able to balance things out. But here, the emphasis is being placed on the idea that what makes us lazy is not controlling our stomachs. There's another thing that comes to the fore, another idea of that which causes us to be lazy. And that's separating ourselves from good company, alienating oneself from others for the sake of being alone. The Quran tells us, وَاتَّصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. And so there's this idea of community and the importance of community and the importance of that community being based on the Quranic values. When we're around others, they influence us in goodness. Just like when we're around others, they influence us negatively. And so for everything that I've mentioned so far as being a cause of causing us to be lazy, like for instance, the issue of being extreme, well, the opposite is to be balanced. If we talk about over excess in food being a cause to us to be lazy, well, the opposite of that is controlling our food intake. If we're talking about isolating ourselves, then the opposite of that is keeping good company, or being in bad company that influences us negatively with characteristics that cause us to be lazy. Then the opposite is that which is the medicine, which is to be around good company, which teaches us balance and so on and so forth. Another cause to laziness, this is a hard one to swallow, is the idea of not remembering that we are going to die, the akhirah. The idea that we're not going to come to account, right? This weakens us in many instances. And overemphasis on the idea of death also can cause us to despair, so there has to be some sense of balance. Right? In the past, the hadith we had, verily I have prohibited you from visiting the graves, but now you can visit them, for they provide admonition. They provide a lesson for us. I'm just summarizing some of because there's a lot of details, but I'm just summarizing some of the key points because I don't want this live to be too long. And another cause is to neglect worship that will assist us to continue to build ourselves up, like the issue of periodically waking up in the middle of the night and praying to Allah, like the issue of making dhikr, like the issue of pushing for the sunnah, to pray the sunnah prayers in addition to the obligatory prayers, to keep a balance in these things, right? When we neglect, the idea of training ourselves, then we also begin to get lazy. So we have to push ourselves, but when we push ourselves, we have to be balanced in that process. Another problem that we find ourselves in that causes us to be lazy is just confining ourselves to one practice of Islam. And this is why we find in the Quran is mentioned, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fi silmi kaffa. Those of you who believe, come into Islam with your whole self. In other words, Islam is a whole way of life. It's not easy to practice if we confine ourselves to one aspect, and it's not easy to practice if we go extreme. That's why it takes balance. But Islam is not just about salah, and it's not just about smiling. It's not just about making money, and it's not just about family time. See what I'm saying? It's all of those things plus more. So we have to learn how to utilize our time in such a way that we take inspiration, like we're balanced and we can grow, right? And the other example that was mentioned was that taking extra acts of ibadah should be to train ourselves so that our basic ibadah is strong. And then we mentioned also that going to the extreme of that is also a problem. But we have to learn how to train ourselves, right? We have to learn how to train ourselves. And at the end, I want to end with this, that many of us may lack the discipline that's necessary in order to carry the responsibility of the da'wah. So here is mentioned lack of preparation for facing obstacles and hardships. Many times we want things to be easy. right? And that doesn't mean that we should look for problems and hardship, but we also have to prepare ourselves for what it means to establish deen, for what it means to establish the dawah. And the dawah, we said, is to think about and act towards what's in the benefit of the Muslim community as a whole, right? It's not just the issue of calling people that are not Muslims into Islam, but is the issue of ensuring that the Muslims have a foundation, is ensuring that the Muslims' needs are being met, is ensuring that we're building community. Everything that we need in order to be a healthy community is part of the dawah. And actually, I forgot one point that I wanted to mention that leads to the issue of laziness, and that's the problem of disorganization. People rushing towards things, being spontaneous in work, either at the individual level or the collective level, not planning things out. Many Muslims, whether working alone or as a team, their work is done in an undisciplined, haphazard way, giving priority to secondary issues while ignoring that which is primary. This leads to more sacrifice, more effort, and then from there people burn out and they end up becoming lazy, and at the end of the day, because of the lack of priorities, they end up falling short, right? And of course, there's no doubt that when we disobey Allah wa ta'ala, it impacts us. Sin has its impact. So those are some of the key ideas with regard to this obstacle in dawah, apathy, and everything that's mentioned here as part of what is a cause to apathy. When we look at the opposite of it, then we learn how to gain energy and motivation and how to be resilient, right? So we have to be organized, we have to be disciplined, we have to have a sense of priorities, right? We have to be balanced, right? And we have to ensure that we're protecting ourselves with keeping a relationship with Allah wa ta'ala and keeping good company. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.